I'm Jared Bowen. Tonight on Greater Boston, one-on-one with Governor Maura Healey on how the state of the Commonwealth is affected by the state of the arts, her push to invest in live theater across the state, and what to do about the Sackler name still chiseled into the walls of the Harvard Art Museums. Then later, 50 years after prisoners of war were released from the so-called Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam, a group of them are telling their stories in a new exhibition at the American Heritage Museum. We hear from Governor Maura Healey every day on some of the most critical issues in our state, from skyrocketing housing prices and the ever-troubled MBTA to homelessness, addiction, and access to mental health care. But it turns out she's also been carving out time to focus on the arts, one of the state's less talked about economic engines. I recently sat down with Governor Healey to discuss her plan for investing in the arts and artists, the culture wars now resulting in bans on books and drag, and where the governor's culture cravings take her. Governor Maura Healey, thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you.
So we'll talk about your arts agenda in just a moment, but first, let's talk about you and the arts. What's your go-to when you need your fix or you need that balm?
Well, aren't we lucky here in Massachusetts? Not just in Greater Boston, but around the state. And, you know, it is something that I really appreciate, whether it's going to a museum, going to a bookstore to look for the latest editions, going to explore some of our open studios, our galleries. I like to listen to music, and we have such a variety of music halls and concert venues around the state. So no shortage of things to take in.
So you're a live music person. We saw Brandy Carlisle at your inauguration. You're a live music person.
I love live music, and I love Brandy, and invited her to come play at my inauguration, which she did. She'll be back in Massachusetts in just a few months, and hopefully I'll see her again. But so many great acts. Spring coming, now our outdoor venues will be available, and it's just great.
You spent a couple of years in Europe playing basketball, of course, but Austria, that's a very arts-rich environment, especially in Europe, especially in Austria, Vienna. Does that at all inform how you look at the arts and what we should be doing in this country and here in Massachusetts?
Well, I think it starts a little bit further back even. I grew up loving arts and antiquities and auctions. My family was involved in auctions, in the auction business, and particularly antiquities. And I think that's where some of this began. Certainly I lived in Salzburg. It's home to Mozart, and so that was next level in terms of exposure to arts. And throughout Europe, I traveled a lot in Europe, and you're able to visit different museums and the like. And so there's that. And then I think here within Massachusetts, particularly after COVID, I mean, we really, I think, have collectively developed a new appreciation for the arts and culture and shows and things that we could not see for a period of time. And hopefully that helps folks understand just how important and fundamental they are to our way of life, to the social fabric of community, to who we are. And that's why I come to this job now as your governor, wanting to do as much as we can to both celebrate arts and culture here in the state and also invest in it like we haven't before.
Is it worthy of a cabinet level position with you?
Well, we'll see about that. I can tell you we're not wasting any time in getting started with our investments. Record investments proposed for Mass Cultural Council. We also propose some tax credits, relief for those who were engaged in movie production in the state, and also pre-Broadway, post-Broadway production. The idea will be provide some live theater tax credits to both attract more people and talent to Massachusetts and help those who are in the business. $3 million in a fund just for our independent movie theaters to help them buy new screens. I think about the funding that we have for workforce and apprenticeship programs through the arts, as well as tourism. We've got a $6 million program that helps direct people to places, cool places in the arts to visit across Massachusetts. So you'll hear our administration not only investing in the arts, but visiting our wonderful arts and culture institutions around the state and trying to find ways to really lift them up and celebrate them.
Going back to the theater tax credit that you just mentioned, we know well the movie tax credit here. We see it all around us now, but there's never been traction for a live theater credit. what was the fulcrum point for you to see the value in that?
Well, you know, we have so many shows coming through Massachusetts and so much production within Massachusetts, but we could do even more to support live theater in this state. Again, this is an industry, a space so hard hit during the pandemic. So my view was, let's find ways to support live theater throughout Massachusetts. Many of these are small businesses, right? So we also have additional assistance for $78 million in grants for small businesses. But this special targeted tax credit for those doing live theater.
I talk to artists all the time, of course. I know there are myriad issues they're facing, from lost revenue to lack of rehearsal space, lack of studio space. What do you see, what have you identified as some of the most critical areas of need in the arts community now?
I think housing has to be the top, far and away, the top issue. And I was over in East Somerville the other day. There's a wonderful pottery gallery over there, and potters working, and they do all sorts of training, have school kids in, and just members of the public can go and take classes. And it's also studio space. And so I was talking with a number of the artists there, and to a person, they all talk about housing, the high cost of housing. Rents have gone up, housing prices have gone up. And so, you know, one of the top goals of our administration is to increase housing production around the state. Because whether you're in the Berkshires or Cape and Islands or in Suffolk County or Middlesex County, I mean, across the state, we just need to find ways to increase housing production and lower costs and make housing more accessible to people. That's really, I think, the top priority right now.
The arts as an economic engine, what's kind of befuddled me and made me cross at times is the fact that people don't understand what the arts brings. Pre-pandemic, it was $2.2 billion in revenue that was generated, $100 million in taxes, and 70-something thousand jobs. What's there to be leveraged? I mean, how do you see that as an economic engine, the arts as a whole?
I've seen great shows lately, including Six and Hamilton again. Into the Woods was in town as well. But I think about the productions and the arts and what's happening around our state. And they truly are so essential. I mean, you think about the jobs created. This is why we need to invest more. Our state, Jared, actually lags behind other states when it comes to investments in the arts. And this is a space that is a $2 billion contributor to our economy, $128 million in revenue every year alone. We could be doing even more, right? And so part of what we've proposed in the budget and in our tax relief package are ways to really make that investment in the arts. One thing I think is exciting, though, to talk about and think about, and we've been thinking about it a lot, even within the State House, who has not been reflected, who has not been uplifted in the arts. And in this moment, I think there's a huge opportunity for greater representation. We're having that conversation generally, but I think within the arts, one of the things that I'm looking to do as governor is to uplift and amplify voices, faces, stories, artists who have not been as widely profiled. And I'm hoping to even be able to do some of that within the State House.
To see either work on view? In what way?
I think work on view and having greater diversity of artist representation in our public buildings, in our public spaces, right? I also think it would be great to bring artists in to our agencies. Right? Imagine our roadways and bridges and, you know, some of the infrastructure, and you think about the ways we can incorporate art into that. A lot of cities have done this. They've done this very well and beautifully. I think we could do that on a different level when it comes to some of the state infrastructure, state public buildings, and I think it will be, it'll be something that people will really come to appreciate.
Another threat to the arts right now is the book bans that we're seeing, the Tennessee ban on drag performances. In Wisconsin, a school would not allow a song by Dolly Parton and Miley Cyrus to be performed because it was too suggestive. They thought, the school administration did, that it was too suggestive of LGBTQ issues. How are you looking at this moment where we're in culture wars again?
Yeah. Isn't it distressing? I mean, I can't believe that some of this is being resurrected again, but it's just where we are in terms of some of the dynamics, particularly the the political expediency of some of this, right? And, you know, the perpetration of different forms of bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, racism even, in the guise of either religious freedom or so-called parental rights, what have you, right? My view is the way to fight back is to double down on those investments. Massachusetts, we're home to the first public school in the country. Education is enshrined in our Constitution. We're also home to the first public library. And I'm really proud that in our proposed budget, we made historic investments in public libraries. So that is my response. We believe in books. We believe that children should be exposed to a diversity of books, for example. We stand up for those in performance arts. We stand up and stand behind the LGBTQ community in Massachusetts.
Moving to Harvard for a moment, you're a Harvard alum, of course. You're also one of the people who led the charge as Attorney General against the Sacklers, of course, for their role in the OxyContin, the proliferation of OxyContin in this country. The Sackler name is still on the Harvard Art Museums. Should that name come down?
I'd like to see it taken down, absolutely. I've had a lot to say about the Sacklers and just the devastation they caused to so many families across Massachusetts and across this country. So it's my view that their name has no place on any building of significance anywhere. Of course, that's something for individual universities to address.
Well, the current president, and of course he's on his way out, but Larry Bacow has said it's inappropriate to take it down because of contractual, well, I assume because of contractual negotiations and so on and so forth. But is there any justification at this point for any institution, any university, any medical center to keep that name up when so many others have?
You know, there may be legal reasons, and I'm not privy to all the contracts there. I just look at all of this as blood money, and, you know, therefore think it's a shame when names like that are ascribed to buildings of significance and importance. It's just as a general matter.
Well, Governor Healey, it's a great joy to talk about art with you and to hear how you're going to move it forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to more conversation.
Next up, it's been 50 years since the first American prisoners of war were first brought home from the Hoa Lo prison in Vietnam. Known to prisoners as the Hanoi Hilton, Hoa Lo held hundreds of American soldiers, including the late Senator John McCain, between 1964 and 1973. 50 years ago, with the end of the Vietnam War, the first of those prisoners were released and flown home to the United States. Some 600 American POWs who later described the extreme torture, isolation, and starvation they endured there.
They blindfolded me, bound and gagged me, put me on a truck and bumped me over the 27 miles in the back of a dump truck into the Hanoi Hilton to begin 6 years. I'm put in a cell. I've not seen another soul, and I'm left by myself. And it was the worst period in my life, including the torture. I wanted to die. There is no question about that. Everything in my life had been taken away from me.
Their capture, imprisonment, and eventual release is the focus of a new exhibition at the American Heritage Museum. Featuring an original cell shipped from Vietnam, first-hand accounts from soldiers like those you just heard, and interactive displays, the exhibit offers a look at the brutal conditions faced by American prisoners. I was recently joined by Rob Collings, president of the American Heritage Museum. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Jared.
Well, I just kind of outlined in the broadest sense what we'll talk about why it was called the Hanoi Hilton, what it was like, but what was the essence of what was happening there?
The Hanoi Hilton was a prison that went back to the late 1800s, a French colonial prison that a lot of the airmen and soldiers were held in during the Vietnam War. And they endured some of the most brutal physical and psychological torture. They would be in isolation for, in many cases, 3-4 years before they saw anyone else. So it's an amazing story of the human spirit, of how they survived this. And they really kind of came together and pulled one another up when they had these really, really awful days.
And I toured this with you recently, and the experience I felt that I had there was just incredible, like any museum experience where you can have firsthand contact with something that actually existed, that I think many of us picture from the John McCain pictures, actually knowing where he suffered. What's the experience that you expect visitors will have when they come face to face with an actual prison cell.
So everyone knows the POW MIA flag. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. But what is that about? What did they go through? And to go inside one of those cells, actually stand on the concrete floor they were standing. You see these concrete bed slabs with shackles that their legs would be shackled to. It brings a whole new understanding of what it was like. And it's still mind-boggling to me, going in there day after day, that they could have endured that.
I think one of the things that was so impactful to me was we saw one of the accounts there from your museum, the interviews that you did with surviving POWs about that experience. Once you're hearing the brutality that they endured as you're looking at this prison, it's nearly incomprehensible. But you worked with the POWs, the surviving POWs, for this exhibition. How did you work with them? What did they share? Because again, this is something I'm sure they don't particularly want to remember.
The POWs that we were working with are just an amazing group of gentlemen. What they went through, how normal they are today, when you think about the torture and abuse they went through, then physically and mentally, they're so amazing. But we needed them for multiple reasons. One is there's no photos of what this looked like. The Vietnamese didn't take any pictures of what the torture room looked like or anything like that. You had to go back and get those accounts from them. And one of those gentlemen, Mike McGrath, he has just a remarkable memory. So when he came home, he was sketching everything as an artist, sketching what it looked like. And those are your firsthand accounts, really, of what was going on there. So that was a part of it for this reconstruction of these cells, because they'd been deconstructed. They came to us as pallets of bricks and concrete slabs and so forth that had to be put back together again. But then it's that human story, it's that essence of what they went through. And to have them on film, projected in these cells, telling the story of what it was like, makes it exceptionally real for people when they go through.
So how did they survive this? Some of these men were there for, I think, up to 7 years, and it's not just men. In a few cases, there were women as well. Solitary confinement for years and years and years, no access to the outside world, not supposed to even be able to communicate with other prisoners. How did they survive?
It's almost impossible to imagine they survived, especially when you bring up like this isolation, that they were by themselves. The first airman shot down as a POW, Ev Alvarez, was there in 1964. Now, it's a lonely thought to be in a prison cell in solitary confinement. Then when you know you're the only one, I can't even begin to imagine it. Then there was a second, a third, and they came in. And shortly thereafter, they established this tap code, and it was arranging the alphabet in a 5 by 5, and they'd be tapping to one another messages. Now, getting caught doing that meant you would go into the shackles, and in some cases for months on end. And I don't mean at nighttime. They would be in leg shackles for months on a concrete slab. But it was so important to communicate, like we're doing right now. Could you imagine 3-4 years without communicating with another human being? So even just if you're tapping through a wall and you're able to let them know on the other side you're not alone, that was amazing. Now later in the war, after about 1970, they're putting a lot of prisoners together for a variety of reasons. That changed everything for them. You might have been in a little cell and it was crowded and there were 4 guys in there. But that's 4 guys where you can start to suck information out of their heads. They called it Hanoi University. You might speak German, I might speak Spanish. We're going to teach you one another language.
Just something to do for the 24 hours that you're in.
Keep your mind occupied. That was the biggest thing, was keeping your mind occupied, because that solitary confinement is one of the worst things imaginable. Your mind just starts running away all the time.
Well, you also illustrate in this exhibition the terror that they had. They would hear the keys jangling as they were coming, and they knew that meant that they were going to be pulled out of the cell and tortured again. We know that John McCain could never lift his arm above a certain length because their arms were pulled out of their sockets. And yet, going back to the Hanoi Hilton, that was a sense of humor that they had. It was their title, the Hanoi Hilton, in the midst of all of this trauma.
So the name Hanoi Hilton came with the second prisoner, and he just wrote it. They had a little tiny piece of toilet paper, which normally that was their paper if they were lucky enough to have any, and they would write down he wrote down this message when he saw this third airman get shot down looking through a hole, "Welcome to the Hanoi Hilton," and he hid this message. That's how it became known as that. It was a sense of humor. It was joking. And humor was so important to them. They all broke at some point. They went past the code of conduct, name, rank, serial number, but they would have these stories because the Vietnamese couldn't believe like an F-4 Phantom could fly off of an aircraft carrier. They said, no, it needs a 5,000-foot runway. And they would say, well, we have a lot of ships out in the Gulf of Tonkin. We just line them up in a row and we make 5,000 feet. They would do all sorts of things that for them, when they went back to their cell, brought them a sense of joy almost, that they were just having these jokes that they could have.
For the opening of this exhibition recently, you had a number of POWs there. What was that experience like?
That was an amazing day to have 19 of these POWs there at that exhibit and to have them up on stage and to hear their stories. And it wasn't what you would think. There was not the gory stories of what they went through with, as you said, dislocating shoulders was a very popular thing for the Vietnamese to do for torturing. But it was the stories of resilience. It was a story we can all relate to. We've all had difficult days, and they had really difficult days, but they were there for one another, and how they came together and brought one another back up when they were at their lowest point. That was the inspiration for me.
As I mentioned, this is the 50th anniversary. We're now in the 50th anniversary cycle of when the first POW started coming home. What was their experience like? Because I think we recall that the experience for a lot of Vietnam veterans was they were coming back to a country that was very hostile to them for participating in the war.
So we have these POWs returning to the U.S. to a very different place than what they left. They missed out on a lot of what went on. You know, when the first guy was shot down, the Beatles hadn't come to the U.S. By the time he came out, the band had broken up. Man had walked on the moon. MLK had been assassinated. Look at all these events that defined that period. But they did have something. They did have a lot of resources that were expended on them for their physical condition, for their mental condition, and also they were celebrities when they came back. They came back to more of a hero's welcome. They had a dinner at the White House with John Wayne and all these people. And to a degree, they felt a survivor's guilt. And they said, we came home to this, to a White House dinner, yet everyone else came home to getting spit on at the airport, and those guys lost legs and arms and things. So it's amazing how someone who could go through such a horrible experience still feel survivor's guilt.
Rob, before I let you go, I have to quickly ask, in our last segment, we were just talking about shooting down these UFOs. It's this phenomenon that seems to be happening now, but it's not a new one, as you pointed out to me when I was at your museum. When did this start, as you can prove?
Well, balloons for observation go back to the Civil War. And in World War I, they were a mainstay of observation behind enemy lines, looking in. What was the other side doing, moving material and troops to the front? So we have a World War I aircraft, actually America's first fighter plane, a Newport 28, French-built aircraft. And those were predominantly used for shooting down other aircraft, but balloons were a big part of that. And a very, very difficult target, because the balloons then were tethered and had a large amount of anti-aircraft guns around it. Now we have F-22s shooting down balloons, which is a much easier prospect. But 110 years on, and things are back to the same.
And yours is staying put, though. It hasn't been conscripted yet.
No, it hasn't been conscripted yet. They have something better to use.
Well, Rob, the exhibition has stayed with me for the days since I saw it about the Hanoi Hilton. Thank you so much for being here to talk about it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that is all for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Jared Bowen. Thanks for watching.
It's the great state of Massachusetts.
You know this song, right? Of course you don't. Nobody does. And yet, it's an official state song of Massachusetts. Now that's an official, not the official, because Massachusetts has 7 different state songs. Now that might sound like a lot of songs for just one small state, and yet they don't really come anywhere close to capturing the true, full musical legacy of the great state of Massachusetts.
Hear the rockets first shot upward.
Do they represent who we are? Do they represent the best of who we aspire to be? And I think that that's what anything that is labeled as a state anything should do.
Pace center for the rest. It's the bass.
Let's hear what we got. First up is the original, All Hail to Massachusetts. It was written in the 1950s by a Wellesley music teacher and became the Bay State's first official song in the 1960s.
All hail to Massachusetts.
Sounds pretty patriotic, but it's not the official patriotic song of the Commonwealth. Local businessman and showman at heart Bernard Davidson wrote the patriotic song in the mid-1980s and campaigned tirelessly to get it officially recognized by the state. His dream came true in 1989. Massachusetts also has an official ode. This one is by Joseph one-man band Falzone, a longtime Suffolk Downs employee who moonlighted as a musician and comedian. This song got the official nod from the state in the year 2000. Rather have an intimate acoustic session brimming with state pride? Ah, there is a state folk song for you.
Burning bright in Massachusetts.
Now, if dancing is more your thing, you could stomp and stride to the state ceremonial march. Or you could cut loose with some triple steps and promenades to the official state polka. And then there is the state glee club song. Written hastily by a Worcester politician and his musician pal as a theme song of sorts for the 1960 Democratic presidential nominee, John F. Kennedy. Now, as best as we can tell, this song has never been recorded, but we found a copy of the sheet music in the state library, and we asked award-winning a cappella group, the 8 Tracks, to bring it to life for us.
It's the great state of Massachusetts, homeland for you and me.
Sorry, can we just, is it just me or does it feel like something's missing here? I mean, where are the artists of color? Where are the women composers? No hip-hop? No jazz? No R&B?
So the notion of a song that represents we is ironic in a season when we're still trying to figure out what does we mean.
So I asked Price if there was a song that he would add to the roster, and he suggested that Massachusetts do something truly unique. Adopt an official state playlist.
Think about what that means in terms of a representative democracy, that we're not privileging one sound over another. We're not privileging one culture over another. I want to hear us in all of our grandeur. I want to hear it all.
Massachusetts of the 50, it's the best.
Or at least the 13th best.
Next time